We walk the grounds, we see the destruction of their habitat, and we know why the decline of moose population has been happening.
Tonight, the Algonquins of Barriere Lake say the Quebec government is ignoring their traditional hunting knowledge.
I had a roller coaster ride of emotions. It was really important to us, and it was really good to see the turnout, our community turnout for the opening of the big house.
And the Heiltsuk Nation in British Columbia celebrates the opening of their new big house. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. British Columbia has just become the first province to introduce human rights legislation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That means the government will ensure Indigenous peoples are full participants in all aspects of the province. To tell us more about what the historic legislation means, we're now joined by APTN's Tina House, who is at the BC Legislature in Victoria.
Just hours ago, history was made here at the BC Legislature as legislation was introduced to fully implement the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Joining me here today is Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. Grand Chief, tell me what you're feeling today.
Well, it's been an amazing day, without question. As you may well appreciate, this has been an incredibly long and challenging journey going back many decades, and it's hard to believe that we were in the House a couple of hours ago and both sides of the House supported the introduction of Bill 41, and you know, the sense of optimism and hope. The energy in the room was very palpable, and you know, we've suffered setbacks and heartbreak in the past where there were similar efforts advanced, but I think this time, because it's a different time, there are different circumstances, different challenges, that the electorate, that the representatives in the House understand that the status quo is no longer acceptable. It's been absolutely wreaking havoc on the lives of the people here in the province of British Columbia. And it's very timely to take this decisive step and fully embrace the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and everything that represents. The Declaration is not only something of value to Indigenous people, but to all British Columbians. And I think it will provide the opportunity and the space to develop a framework, a path forward, so all parties in the province, Indigenous peoples, the third-party interests, business and industry, Indigenous peoples themselves, it affords the opportunity to move together in a very structured dialogue. In terms of Indigenous peoples, at long last we'll be able to fulfill the pronouncements in the Sir Wilfrid Laurier Memorial and other foundational declarations such as that. So I think it's been an absolutely amazing day.
Absolutely, and indeed a very proud day for every Indigenous person around the world. Thank you very much. Back to you in studio.
RCMP in Manitoba are pleading for the public to come forward with any information relating to a homicide which occurred this month. The body of Bobby Lynn Lee Moose was found in the northern city of Thompson on October 17th. Moose was from Nitchasawayachik Cree Nation, which is about 90 kilometers from Thompson. The 29-year-old was last seen by family members on October 1st when her sister dropped her off at the local Walmart. RCMP have not released a cause of death, but ruled it a homicide. On Thursday, they released photos of the clothing she was found in with hopes of getting some leads from the public. Police say they know little about her whereabouts prior to when she was found.
Information we have is that she was dropped off by her sister in the parking lot of the Walmart on October 1st. From there, the timeline now is what we're trying to fill in. Is that those missing pieces of information is who was she hanging around with, who was she talking to, what stores did she visit, where was she eating? Like, it's all information that would help us maybe put together who she was with.
To Northern Ontario now, where North Spirit Lake First Nation has declared a state of emergency, citing an addiction crisis compounded by an influx of drugs into the community and a breakdown of the community's water infrastructure. Willow Fiddler brings us this update from Kenora, Ontario.
Well, Thursday morning, the province said they were notified Wednesday of a social crisis happening in North Spirit Lake, but they hadn't received a state of emergency declaration, and that Indigenous Services Canada was assisting the community with their needs. By Thursday around noon, however, that state of emergency declaration came from Chief Caroline Kiesik, who said in a press release, "Our community has been devastated by an influx of drugs and breakdowns in vital infrastructure. Our people are suffering, and we are beyond our ability to respond with the necessary supports." Kiesik goes on to say, "We had no choice but to call this state of emergency as we require an immediate response from the appropriate federal and provincial agencies with resources to support our members suffering from harmful addictions and to help leadership stabilize the economy." Member of Provincial Parliament Saul Mamakwa said he was in North Spirit Lake last week and that the community had been without running water since Friday, October 18. He also said this has been an ongoing issue for the last 2 years. North Spirit Lake is a fly-in First Nation about 500 kilometers northwest of Thunder Bay and has about 300 people living there. Anishinaabe Police Service said there was a health and safety risk to its officers posted in the community, so they transferred them to a neighboring community. Officers returned to North Spirit on Wednesday. Chief of Police Roland Morrison said the detachment and attached residents had been without running water for 6 days, and officers were sent back to the community with cases of bottled water and camping equipment so they could shower. This has also caused the local school to be shut down and is impacting healthcare services at the local nursing station. Indigenous Services Canada said they weren't able to make our deadline today to respond to the questions we asked about their awareness and involvement in what's happening in North Spirit Lake. We'll provide an update once we have those responses from them. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Kenora, Ontario.
The Algonquins of Barriere Lake say Quebec is ignoring their traditional knowledge that shows the moose population is in decline. Located in a wildlife reserve far from any grocery stores, the Algonquin in that area rely on moose as a huge part of their diet. Tom Fenario has more.
Everybody knows elders get fed first. And 64-year-old Toby DeCourcy is grateful. He's eating the most tender part of the moose, the snout. But like the other Algonquin manning this makeshift checkpoint, Coursey has a nagging question. How much longer will they be able to harvest moose on their territory?
In their
native tongue of Anishinaabe, the Coursey and other Algonquin elders describe signs from the land that say the moose population is struggling.
What he's saying is that where they scrape themselves on a tree a long time ago, they used to see a lot of their furs on the tree. So that also is not, we don't see too much of that also.
According to these elders, there are other signs of a declining moose population, mainly that known food sources for moose, such as lily pads, are flourishing like never seen before because there aren't enough moose to eat them. This elder says that moose have come to her in her dreams.
When we sleep, they come to us and give us messages that there's not that much of them left anymore, that they're being overkilled.
Since the start of hunting season in September, the Algonquins of Barriere Lake have been calling for a moratorium on moose sport hunting on their territory, a call that has mainly fallen on deaf ears. So instead they've set up checkpoints like this one, Every hunter that comes through is stopped and told about the moose situation. Charles Ratt says most of the interactions have been cordial.
A lot of them say they're not coming back here next year. A lot of them say that they know the decline is, they realize the decline in the moose population.
Ratt says much of the blame for the decline is on logging in the wildlife reserve.
We walk the grounds, we see the destruction of their habitat, and we know why the decline in moose population has been happening.
Because the moose like to eat a particular kind of root, they often forage into forested areas, making them easy targets for hunters. Deforestation also leads to more open areas, the perfect breeding ground for disease-spreading ticks. Quebec's Ministry of Fauna and Wildlife has met with the various Algonquin First Nations in the area and agreed to do a survey of the moose population in 2020. Many Algonquin here are concerned that the lottery for next year's sport hunt will be held before the survey is done. If that comes to happen, Ratt says there will be consequences.
If the government of Quebec doesn't act on a moratorium, we're going to be here even stronger next year. It's going to be even more, we're going to take more of a direct action, and our intentions are a complete closure of moose hunting next year.
Tom Fenario, de la Vérandre Wildlife Reserve, Quebec.
There was a major shift in government for the Northwest Territories this month. After going from the lowest percentage of female politicians in the legislature, the NWT jumped to the largest number of women in leadership. Today, the wave of women in office continued. Caroline Cochran, MLA for Yellowknife's Range Lake District, is the new premier for the NWT. It was a tight race. No candidate secured a majority of the vote in the first two rounds. Finally, Caroline was elected by MLAs during the third ballot. She is the only female premier in Canada and the second female premier for the territory.
So for each member that stands here, my commitment is to always have an open door, to put my heart in the people and to hear your words, because together we make a stronger government. And working together with our Indigenous and community organizations in the NGO world, we will make this next 4 years the most progressive government in the Northwest Territories.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll take you to another historic event. This one, 120 years in the making.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamarand, and coming up on Nation to Nation, a couple of political junkies join me to dissect the election results and what they may mean to Indigenous people in this new era of a minority government. We also talk to the newly minted Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre, Leah Gazan, who took the seat back for the NDP. She's Lakota and a longtime educator in social justice and climate activist. Finally, we'll have more from Wednesday's post-election press conference by Justin Trudeau and what direction he may go in terms of Indigenous policy. That's right after the national news.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Sunny and 13 for Fredericton and St. John's. 6 in Nain, 8 for Happy Valley Goose Bay with showers. Sunny and 11 for Montreal, rain, and 6 in Saguenay. 12 in Toronto, London, and Sarnia. Sunny and 11 in Ottawa. 8 with the sun out in Thunder Bay. Partly cloudy and 7 for Sioux Lookout. +3 with a rain-snow mix in Churchill. Snow and 6 above in God's Lake. 11 for Winnipeg. 12 in Gimli and Dauphin. 17 is the high for Regina and Estevan. 18 under sunny skies in Swift Current. Showers and 6 for Meadow Lake and La Ronge. Welcome back. The Heiltsuk Nation in British Columbia celebrated the opening of their new big house. The last big house in the First Nations territory along the BC coast was destroyed 120 years ago. There were 5 days of celebrations and ceremony for the opening, and APTN's Lee Wilson was there to witness this historic event.
It has been over 100 years since a big house stood in Bella Bella. One stands today thanks to the resilience of Heiltsuk people. Hundreds of visitors from across Turtle Island come to celebrate 5 days of ceremony filled with song, dance, and traditional foods. For BC coastal nations, big houses are a center of governance and traditional practice. Hereditary Chief Harvey Humchit shares the excitement of the historic opening of the House of the Heiltsuk.
I had a roller coaster ride of emotions. It was really important to us, and it was really good to see our community turn out for the opening of the big house.
The Canadian government banned potlatching in 1885. 4 years later, in 1890, children started being sent away to residential schools. Heiltsuk ceremonial practices were forced underground in order to survive.
The potlatches were banned by the Canadian government a long time ago, and for over 60 years we continued on without performing our potlatches. Now this big house is going to ensure that we can carry on our potlatch.
The potlatch ban ended in 1951, but it took time for Heiltsuk people in Bella Bella to start practicing culture openly again.
And one of the things that was so interesting and so sad at the same time was that even though the potlatch ban had been lifted in Canada, nobody told our people it's okay for you to do this anymore. So our people didn't actually start potlatching again until the early 1980s.
Construction of House of the Heiltsuk was the vision of many members who have now passed on. Initial donations for building the big house came in more than 50 years ago. Now, in collaboration with community, hereditary chiefs, and tribal council, they were able to raise $7.2 million to complete the project and carry out the ceremonies.
One of the very first donations came in the late 60s. I think it was 1967 or 68 came in. And it's only been in the last 10 or 12 years where we really made the huge push. So it's been 40 plus years of trying to make this happen, and it's finally culminated in this today.
Most of the wood used in building the big house came from Heiltsuk territory. 4 beautiful house posts hold up the frame, carvings led by Heiltsuk artist Ian Kelly. Larry Campbell designed art decorates the face of the big house, and a pole gifted by the Haida Nation, carved by artist Christian White. The pole is reinforcement of an ancient peace agreement between the Haida and the Heiltsuk, who had a history of war pre-contact. Haida hereditary chief Gadansta tells how the nations came together.
David Gladstone, Humjit, had brought some of the songs that were held here for years, but he brought those ones back to a potlatch, and from there we started the discussions.
With both Haida and Heiltsuk blessing the pole, it was raised to stand in front of the big house, finalized with potlatch and celebration. The agreement strengthens the alliances for defending their land, water, and rights.
When you look at what's happening globally, we've had a lot of success protecting the Great Bear Rainforest and half of Haida Gwaii. But yet, the global forces that are happening are, put everything in peril.
The big house stands to preserve culture and serves as a place for social gatherings, and will focus on the young Heiltsuk to practice song, dance, and ceremony.
And it gives me a really good feeling to see that our young people who are the focal point of the opening yesterday, it gives me a good feeling to see that they've learned our ways, our cultural dances, and can perform them. Sort of a succession plan for us.
Youth will gain knowledge and language from elders and teachers, who will pass it down to the generation after them, as been practiced for thousands of years before.
Investing in our youth and making sure that they have the opportunity to express themselves as Heiltsuk people has been the vision of our leaders for a long time. So everything that we do here yesterday, today, and in the coming days, and going into the future is all for all the young children that are yet to be born.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Bella Bella, British Columbia.
What a beauty. Well, for some would-be members of Alberta's Sauvage First Nation, the fight to be added to the banned list has been a long, drawn-out process. Tamara Pimentel dug into their stories for her first APTN Investigates episode, Membership Denied. Here's a preview.
Go. Wait. Membership. And go. It means different things to different people. Member, hang on.
Sometimes it gives you a sense of identity. But for one mother in Alberta, it could do much more.
What I wanted was a relationship with my family, and I knew that if I pursued band membership that I wouldn't get a relationship.
Taken in the 60s scoop, Deborah Serafincian was raised in a non-Indigenous family. She always longed for a sense of belonging.
You go to a family reunion or you go any place and you hear a lot of, oh, she looks just like her dad, oh, she looks just like her mother, and oh, Deb looks like nobody.
In the mid-90s, she traced her roots to the Sauvage First Nation in northern Alberta. It's an exclusive band. According to Indigenous Services Canada, there are just 42 on-reserve members and over 400 live off-reserve. Sauvage is famous in Alberta for its hotel chain and for the lucrative oil rights it owns. But when Serafincian tried to become a member of this very wealthy band, she found a mountain of red tape that was almost impossible to climb.
You can watch the entire episode tomorrow night, right here after the APTN National News. The government took away his license plate, but the Indian car guy rides again. That story coming up after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Snow and 3 above for High Level and Fort Chipewyan. 20 above with showers for Medicine Hat. 18 and rain in Lethbridge. Showers and 12 for Vancouver and Tofino. 15 with rain for Victoria. Sunny skies and 6 in Fort Nelson. Snow and +2 for Dease Lake. Snow and -4 for Old Crow. +2 in Whitehorse. Welcome back. The Indian car rides again. A Cree man in Winnipeg has won his bid to keep a set of vanity plates paying tribute to a popular song. Bruce Spence, who's also a producer here at APTN News, had his license plates revoked earlier this year. This came after someone sent a complaint to Manitoba Public Insurance, the Crown Corporation in charge of issuing license plates in the province. The plates read NDN Car and pays tribute to the song Indian Cars by Keith Secola and the Wild Band of Indians. Spence, with the help of a national advocacy group, took the issue to court. MPI eventually decided to give Spence the plates back.
When I got it revoked, I didn't think it was fair at all. I mean, it's just the Indian Car, you know. It's just the song, you know. So why anybody would want to take offense to that and force me to hand over my plate is beyond me. So I'm very happy that somebody has decided to make a commitment to free speech.
And he was parading around the newsroom with the plates all day. Congrats, Bruce, for keeping up your fight. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And stay up to date with the very latest by downloading the APTN News app. Stick around, an all-new post-election edition of Nation to Nation with Todd Lamarand is next. Have a good night.